single mother of 3 children who works as a nighttime janitor for the police department. One day, during her night shift, she knocks down a box containing case files. As she bends to rearrange the files, she sees pictures from a recent murder case. And from looking at the case board of suspects, she immediately pieces everything together and points out that one of the suspects is actually a victim. The next day, as all the officers gather for a meeting concerning the murder case, Detective Karadek notices the change on the case board and inquires about it.
Hey, who did this?
But everyone is as confused as he is, so he gets angry and orders his team to look through the CCTV footage. They discover from the footage that Morgan is responsible for the change and invite her to the station for questioning.
This is Detective Osdell. We need you to come down to the station.
The lieutenant is curious about her reason for changing the suspect to a victim, so Morgan makes a comprehensive analysis just by looking at the photos from the case files. According to the case, a man had been murdered and his wife vanished after the murder, making her the prime suspect. But from a glance at the photos, Morgan immediately points out evidence to prove that there was a third person on the day of the murder and that his person must have kidnapped the wife to shift the police's focus. As they discuss, an officer enters and announces they found footage of someone entering the victim's house on the day of the murder. Although this proves that there was a third person, Detective Karadek insists that Morgan is arrested for tampering with the police investigation.
Yeah, I know how to stand. Thanks.
In the meantime, they review footage from the day of the murder and discover that a woman named Miss Zhang had visited the victim's home 30 minutes before the murder.
Who is she?
Lishka Zhang.
Miss Zhang, a former employee of the victim, is brought in for questioning, but she denies everything and claims she was at home on the day of the murder.
I was at home all day working.
Can anyone confirm that?
Later that day, Morgan is released from jail, and as she walks out, she overhears the officers talking about Miss Zhang's footage. From a glance at the footage, Morgan immediately notices that it has been altered, so she voices this out.
The video has the wrong date on the timestamp.
However, Detective Karadek brushes off her suspicions. As she turns to leave, the lieutenant stops her for an explanation. She explains that the wind blew from south to north in the footage, which shouldn't be the case since winds blow from north to south during the fall in LA. Since the wind was blowing from the south, the footage must have been from months ago.
So that's got to be from several months ago.
After fact-checking her claims, they realized that the footage had been altered to make Miss Zhang a prime suspect.
She's right on both counts.
As Morgan leaves the station, the lieutenant stops her for a discussion. Morgan confesses that she has an IQ of 160 and that she watches a lot of documentaries.
The technical term is high potential intellectual. Means you have advanced cognitive abilities.
Meanwhile, Detective Karadek meets up with the daughter of the victim, who tells him that weeks before the murder incident, her missing mother, Lynette, had received a secret letter from a woman named Sarah. After the mother read the letter, Sarah killed herself, so the mother became agitated. Upon hearing this, Detective Karadek becomes curious about the content of the letter and tells Lieutenant about this. They plan to search for the letter in the missing woman's office, so the lieutenant goes to beg Morgan to assist them in solving the case. Later that day, Detective Karadek briefs Morgan on the whole timeline of the case and brings her to question the missing woman's sister. During the questioning, Morgan realizes that the sister is a biologist and is hiding something from the police. When she tells Detective Karadek about her suspicion, he dismisses her for meddling too much. Later, Detective Karadek goes to the missing woman's office and seeks permission to search her office for the missing letter, but they turn down his offer. Unknown to him, Morgan had disguised herself as a nurse to infiltrate the office and find the letter. When she presents the letter to him, he yells at her for stealing the letter since it could lead to her arrest. But she calms him down and tells him to read the letter.
Read the letter. Sarah Atkinson was a paralegal on the Brian Diamond case, and guess what?
The person who wrote the letter had been assaulted by a powerful man named Brian and needed the missing woman's help to sue the man. From this, Morgan suspects that the powerful man has something to do with the murder case. Upon hearing this, Detective Karadek instructs her to return the letter to the office while he calls the powerful man Brian for interrogation. Brian denies knowing anything, and when an officer looks into his alibi, they discover that Brian was in Fontana City on the day of the murder, which rules him out as a suspect.
Diamond wasn't in town the day the murder, wasn't anywhere close. He was in Fontana.
While all this is happening, the office discovers that Morgan has stolen a letter, so they visit the station to lodge a complaint. Seeing the disaster, Detective Karadek dismisses Morgan from the case and tells her to return to her everyday life. But he visits her home the next day to learn more about her suspicions. So she explains that there's something wrong with Brian's alibi of being in Fontana City. This city is known for its fun packs, so Brian doesn't look like the kind of person to visit Fontana City alone. She also reveals that at the sister's house, she saw a toy with a Fontana logo, which means the sister and Brian are having an affair. Detective Karadek notes that her deductions are convincing, but there's nothing they can do since Brian and the sister had an alibi for the day of the murder. As they drive to the station, Morgan raises a suspicion. She believes the murder had happened days before, but the perpetrators staged the scene to make it seem like it happened recently. As they inspect the murder scene, they ultimately conclude that the missing woman had confronted Brian about the assault on the letter, so Brian got violent. Seeing the situation, the missing woman's husband grabs a gun to threaten Brian, but Brian kills him with the gun. Then they tie up the missing woman. And since the sister is a biologist, she suggests that they freeze the house to tamper with the coroner's time of death estimate. Before leaving, they alter the CCTV footage to frame someone else. Once they reach this conclusion, they immediately deduce where Brian had hidden the missing woman, and she's immediately rescued. Seeing this, Lieutenant offers Morgan a consulting position at the police department, but she turns down the offer, saying she isn't cut out to be a detective.
I'm not cut out for this.
The next day, while taking a walk with her eldest daughter at the park, she notices that her daughter is sad about her father, who's been missing for 15 years. The daughter believes that her father abandoned them, but Morgan tries to explain that her husband vanished into thin air.
I know that he would not have left you.
The daughter doesn't believe this, so that day Morgan returns to the station to accept their job offer, but on the condition that they help find her missing husband, Roman Cinqueri, who disappeared years ago. Hearing this, the lieutenant agrees to her offer.
I need you to find someone. His name is Roman Cinquera, and he vanished 15 years ago.
So Morgan begins working as a detective and assists in solving complex cases. One day, she requests progress on the case of her missing husband, so Lieutenant Celine inquires for more details that will lead them to find him. Morgan reveals that the last time she saw her husband was the night he drove his car to buy diapers for their newborn. After that day, he vanished into thin air. After getting this detail, Lieutenant Celine promises to reopen and pursue the case.
All right, I'll see what I can find.
Thank you.
That night, as Morgan eats dinner with her children, her son informs her that the eldest daughter had an A in an art project. Feeling proud, Morgan takes her daughter to the basement
Follow me.
to show her paintings of her missing husband, but this only annoys the daughter since she believes that her father abandoned her. Morgan reassures her that the father will never abandon them and that the police will get to the root of the truth. But one day, Lieutenant stops by Morgan's house to inform her about an update on her missing husband's case. According to the lieutenant, her husband's car had been found at a police impound 3 days after he went missing. Inside the car, they had found a baby's diapers, which means her husband never had the intention of abandoning her. Something terrible must have happened to him. Hearing this, Morgan breaks down in tears. In the next few days, as Morgan continues to help unravel murder cases, the lieutenant discovers an interesting detail on her missing husband's case and confronts a detective named Mellon. It turns out that Detective Mellon had once arrested Morgan's husband for painting a mural on the street 15 years ago.
You wrote the citation and the report, but both are illegible.
She asks him to drive her to the mural's location, so they visit the place together. Once they arrive, they find a mural painting, which the lieutenant hopes will give her a lead on the case. So that night, she visits Morgan once again to share this detail. She shows Morgan pictures of the mural and reveals that her husband had once been detained for painting the mural since the location was an unauthorized place often frequented by criminals. Lieutenant suspects that her husband must have seen something he wasn't supposed to, which led him to go missing. But Morgan shuts this down and claims her husband would have told her if he saw something. Then, she hands over many of her husband's mural paintings to assist the lieutenant in unraveling more about the case. Months after working at the station, Morgan becomes eligible to receive a detective badge. While celebrating the new badge at the restroom, a woman walks in crying, so Morgan becomes worried and inquires about her reason for crying. The woman reveals that her 2 daughters are missing, and she's at the station to make a report, so Morgan assures her that the children will be found. When the detectives question the woman, she reveals that her divorced husband, Wendell, was a radical environmentalist who had always wanted them to live off the grid.
He wanted Mia and the girls to live completely off-grid.
Upon hearing this, the detectives begin an investigation on Wendell, her divorced husband. And they discover he had applied for a children's passport in the previous month. He becomes the prime suspect in the kids' kidnapping, so both Detective Karadec and Morgan pay a visit to his house. They find no one at home, but Morgan notices a greenhouse nearby and goes to inspect it. However, she notices that cucumber and tomatoes are planted together.
Wendell planted cucumbers and tomatoes next to each other?
Which is weird because the 2 plants can't thrive when growing together. And since the suspect was an environmentalist, he should know this. Morgan concludes that the greenhouse had been initially empty, but someone moved the plants in. With this lead, Detective Karadec speculates that the suspect must have moved the plants into the greenhouse to cover up someone or something. So they begin to dig around the floor and immediately discover the dead boy of Wendell, the suspect. This means he was a victim of something bigger, and the 2 missing children are in danger. While inspecting the area, an officer reports that one of the neighbors often saw the dead man with a red-haired woman with glasses. Another officer also finds a portrait of 2 older people in the victim's room, so they plan to investigate their relationship with the victim. Meanwhile, Morgan and Detective Karadec go to visit the mother of the kidnapped girls and realize that her father lives in a mansion with a personal driver on standby in a car. As Detective Karadec interviews the family, Morgan slips out to make friends with one of the housekeepers, who reveals that days before the suspect died, he had met with the father-in-law.
And when I came back down, I saw him coming out of Mr. Ashford's office.
At the office, Morgan reads the report from Child Protection Services on the suspect and tells Detective Karadec that the report doesn't match people's descriptions of the suspect. People described the man as loving, but the report wrote negatively about him. So they researched the social worker who wrote the report and realized it was a red-haired woman wearing glasses named Sarah.
Nice glasses.
She becomes the prime suspect, and when they go to visit her, Morgan notices tons of mail bills on her table. She also points out that Sarah uses cheap dish soap, which means she's broke. However, there's a fresh Hawaiian orchid lei in her room, which is native to Hawaii, which means Sarah had recently gone on a trip to Hawaii.
How comfy are those super soft slippers at a luxury 5-star resort?
Morgan deduces that Sarah is working with the wealthy father-in-law and has been bribed to write a negative report on the dead man. Hearing this, Sarah immediately confesses that the father-in-law had bribed a lot of people to paint the dead man as a bad person.
His father-in-law bought out a lot of people, and then it was time to stop.
So they immediately go to arrest the father-in-law. One of the drivers at the house also confesses that the father-in-law had gone somewhere on the day of the murder. During interrogation, Detective Karadec speculates that the father-in-law had hired a hitman to deal with the dead man because the man had evidence about his unethical business practices. Although the father-in-law denies this claim, he succumbs to pressure after Detective Karadec is convinced that the hitman may have something to do with the kidnapped children. They immediately go to arrest the hitman, but the children are nowhere to be found. Now, back to square one. The detectives begin to suspect that the mother of the kidnapped children must have a motive for killing her ex-husband, since he had the intention of exposing her father's unethical business practices. Upon hearing this, Morgan flares up and tries to exonerate the mother, but the detectives insist on putting her on the suspect list. Suddenly, an officer announces that the mother of the kidnapped girls had been caught withdrawing a huge amount from the bank and had gone missing ever since.
Mia Ashford withdrew $100,000 just before the banks closed today.
With this, the detectives speculate that the mother had killed her ex-husband and kidnapped the kids to keep them from talking. This speculation leads to an argument between Morgan and Detective Karadec. That night, as Morgan watches the news on the kidnapped girls, she notices an artifact behind the girl's photo and recalls not seeing it when she went for inspection at the house, which means someone had taken it.
Nothing was missing, so something was switched.
With this lead, she browses the internet about Chinese artifacts and traces a store that sells artifacts. At the store, she runs into the kidnapped girl's mother and asks why she wants to sell the artifact. So the woman confesses that the kidnapper had reached out for a ransom, so she needed cash to get her girls released. She believes reporting to the police will put her daughters in danger, so Morgan decides to help. They inform Detective Karadek about the development, so he proposes to go with the mother to the ransom exchange location. The mother arrives at the location and gives the bag of money to the kidnapper, but he escapes without releasing the daughters. As everyone panics, Detective Karadek reveals he had placed a tracker in the money bag, so they set out to trace the kidnapper's car. But they find the car on fire with no children in it. As Morgan inspects the burnt car, she turns on the radio so the broadcast automatically switches to a betting station. At this, she immediately remembers that during their visit to the wealthy father-in-law's house, one of the drivers was listening to a betting broadcast, and that his car was parked in a way that allowed him to see the kidnapped girl's mother's room. With this, Morgan concludes that the driver was in love with the mother. So he orchestrated the kidnapping to extract money from the family and live a life worthy enough to ask out the mother. He had also killed the children's father and buried him in the greenhouse in order to kidnap the girls. During interrogation, the driver reveals he had kidnapped and hid the girls on a mountain, but they managed to escape. As the police search for the girls on the mountain, they discover that the little girls had set rescue clues due to the teaching from their father, who was an environmentalist. With this, they're able to locate the little girls through clues and return them to their worried mother. The next day, Morgan brings her daughter to work to fulfill a promise. While showing her daughter around the office, the girl excuses herself to use the bathroom. At the same time, a strange woman walks into the station and snatches a gun from an officer. She holds everyone hostage and claims there's a bomb planted in different parts of the station. As her partner in crime grabs all the officers' phones, Morgan manages to send a text to her daughter to leave the building. The daughter receives the text, and as she's about to leave, she hears a gunshot from her mother's office, so she hesitates. Meanwhile, the two criminals hold the detectives hostage and explain that one of their friends is about to be charged with a murder he didn't commit. So, they want the detectives to find evidence that could prove his innocence. Outside the station, Lieutenant and Detective Karadek run data on the two criminals and discover they're former U.S. military soldiers. The soldiers put a call to Lieutenant, informing her to find evidence that could prove their friend's innocence, or else everyone dies.
Is everyone there all right?
Unknown to them, Morgan's daughter hasn't left the building. Meanwhile, Lieutenant and Detective Karadek gather data on the case to prove the friend's innocence. According to the previous investigation of the case, a senior military soldier had been killed in an RV van with all the evidence pointing to a man named Logan, who was immediately arrested. However, his friends claim he's innocent. As the lieutenant carries on their investigation outside the station, the two military soldiers holding the detectives captive force them to revisit the crime's case board. One of the detectives looks at the board and confirms that all evidence points to Logan. At this moment, Morgan interrupts to point out that something is missing from the crime scene. It's a small detail showing a blood stain with a perfect corner, which means someone had removed a file or paper after the blood spilled.
Look where it stops. That's a perfect corner. Something was there when Frank was killed.
And then gone before the police arrived.
With this lead, Morgan seeks permission to contact the detectives outside. She instructs Detective Karadek to search the dead victim's RV van for any printed paper, but he doesn't find anything. But he decides to look through the victim's computer to find the last file the victim was working on. He discovers that the victim was writing up a paper to punish an unknown soldier.
DD Form 458.
It's a charge form. Brings a soldier in front of a military tribunal.
While everyone is shocked at this, the male captor discovers Morgan's daughter hiding in the corner. So, they bring her to join the other captives. Meanwhile, Detective Karadek invites the victim's daughter for interrogation, and she reveals that her father had missed their dinner date before his death due to being busy.
Last Monday was actually the first dinner he canceled in years.
So, Detective Karadek suggests that Morgan look through the victim's phone location history on the day he missed a date with his daughter. Looking through the phone, Morgan discovers that the dead victim had gone to a place known for its drug dealership before driving to a detox center. So the lieutenant instructs an officer to dig up data of any soldier related to the victim who is dealing with drug abuse. Meanwhile, the male captor begins to grow anxious due to the delay in the investigation. He tries to convince his partner not to trust the police, but she calms him down. Using this opportunity, an officer attempts to subdue the captors, but mistakenly gets shot in the leg. Morgan pleads for immediate medical attention, but the captors refuse. So, Morgan reveals that the female captor is pregnant and in a relationship with Logan, the wrongly imprisoned man. Upon hearing this, the other captor starts an argument, believing his partner in crime betrayed him, but they immediately settle the issue.
No one is lying to you.
Morgan uses emotional manipulation to convince the captor to let the officer receive medical help. So, they agree to send out the injured officer together with Morgan's daughter. Meanwhile, Detective Karadek visits the last location of the dead victim and quickly informs the lieutenant that the victim was last seen with a blonde grunt man. However, the CCTV footage is blurry, so the captors are unable to make out the face. This leads to a tense argument between the two captors, with the man claiming that the police are going nowhere with the case. The woman tries to calm him, but he flares up more. At the corner, Morgan pieces the case together and settles on a speculation. She points out that from the previous investigation, they discovered that the dead victim had bought a tracking device days before his death, which means he had been tracking someone when he visited the drug dealership center.
If the person who killed Frank didn't know he was being tracked, he might still have the tag on him.
Morgan checks the victim's phone and discovers a location tracking app that indicates that the person being tracked had visited the RV van on the day of the murder. With this, Morgan assumes that the murderer is unaware that the tracker is on him, so using the app, she gets the murderer's location, and Detective Karadek goes to make the arrest.
This means you're under arrest for the murder of Frank Weber.
Seeing the situation, the male captor turns on his partner, striking her from behind. He grabs her gun and refuses to release the hostage, demanding a way out of the station. He threatens to detonate the bomb in the office, but Morgan quickly deduces there's no bomb and calls his bluff.
Whatever's in that box, it sure didn't seem to bother the dog I saw this morning.
It was homemade.
The female captor recovers from the blow and confirms the bomb was just a bluff.
She's right.
With that, they overpower the male captor and safely release the hostages. Outside, Morgan reunites with her daughter, and Logan, the wrongly jailed man, is released.